Next, we travel to the city of Kokomo, the county seat of Howard County in the state of Indiana. It was here, in 2013, that a brutal armed home invasion led to the death of an innocent woman. But before we get to that, let's start at the beginning. Destiny Renee Pittman was born on January 9, 1992, to her loving parents, Melvin L. Douglas Jr. and Carla A. Pittman McCombs. One of 5 siblings, she had 2 brothers, Brandon McCombs and Seth Pickett, and 2 sisters, Cheyenne McCombs and Mackenzie Douglas. They all grew up together in Kokomo and were part of a happy, joyous household. In 2013, Destiny was 21 years old and had moved out of her parents' house but still lived in Kokomo, in an apartment at the 800 block of James Drive that she shared with a roommate. She also had a boyfriend who she had been in a relationship with for over a year, but his identity was not revealed to the public. Destiny and her boyfriend both had a dangerous habit though. They both dabbled in selling marijuana to earn a little extra money, and through this business, they came into contact with some dangerous people. On February 7, 2013, Destiny, her boyfriend, and her roommate were spending a relaxed evening at their apartment at the 800 block of James Drive. They had no plans for the night and were looking forward to a calm evening at home. Little did they know that they were about to be engulfed by absolute chaos. At around 9:20 p.m. that night, there was a commotion outside their door. Destiny went outside to see what was happening, and moments later, her boyfriend and roommate heard raised voices and someone screaming in rage, asking for the location of something. Then they heard a loud gunshot, which terrified them, and they both hid inside the apartment. The intruders then entered the house, but luckily did not find the boyfriend or the roommate and left soon after. At 9:33 p.m., officers from the Kokomo Police Department responded to reports of shooting from 800 James Drive. When they arrived, they found Destiny dead outside her apartment, bleeding from a single gunshot wound to her chest. A single .40 caliber shell casing was recovered from the scene, and they found that the bullet had flown straight through Destiny before striking the wall behind her. When police questioned her boyfriend and roommate about the invaders, they learned that the 2 of them had not seen them at all, except for a glimpse of their shoes. When questioned if they knew of any motive behind the robbery, Destiny's boyfriend admitted to the police that he had sold marijuana and had taken a bag containing weed and over $2,000 in cash to another house just days prior to the home invasion. He also told them that Destiny too had her own business selling marijuana, though she had decreased her involvement in this venture after she had recently inherited some money. Police noted that Destiny's stash of marijuana and cash was missing from the apartment and realized that the robbery had likely been the prime motive behind the murder. After this, they took a look at people who used to buy weed from Destiny and her boyfriend, but none of these potential suspects panned out in the investigation. Eventually, the trail went cold and the investigation fizzled out. For 9 long years, the case lay cold, and police had no idea how they would ever find new suspects with the severe lack of evidence and information that was available. But when they were least expecting it, on December 5th, 2022, they got a new lead completely out of the blue. They received a voicemail from an informant who claimed to have information about the murder of Destiny Pittman. The informant, whose identity has not been released to protect their confidentiality, stated that they were with 2 brothers, 32-year-old Joey McCartney and 36-year-old Jesse McCartney, on the night Destiny was killed. They said that it was these 2 brothers who had killed and robbed Destiny that night. The informant then went over the events of that night with the police. The informant claimed Jesse and Joey said they were running an errand and that the informant tagged along. The informant said that they had been sitting in Jesse McCartney's Jeep outside the James Drive apartment when both the McCartneys had left the car and entered the house. The informant then heard a gunshot and saw both men come running out of the house. Jesse was apparently sweating heavily and was carrying a large bag of marijuana in one hand and a wad of cash in the other. The informant also described the gun Jesse had owned and told the police that 6 months after that night, Jesse had sold both his gun and Jeep to cover his tracks. The informant also took the police to the exact house where the killing had happened and pointed out where they had waited in the car and which apartment the McCartneys had entered. The informant told the police that they had taken so long to come forward because they were terrified of Jesse. But eventually, the guilt of knowing what had happened had been too much, and they felt they had to tell the truth. He also told the police that Jesse McCartney had since changed his phone number, but still lived in Kokomo on Monroe Street. They also informed the police of Joey McCartney's location and that he now lived in Kentucky. Having got all this information, detectives from the Kokomo Police Department, working along with the U.S. Marshals, arrested the brothers Jesse and Joey McCartney in February 2023 for the murder of Destiny Pittman. The brothers have pleaded not guilty, and the case will now go on trial. Our next case takes us across the North Atlantic to Cologne, the largest city of the German western state of North Rhine-Westphalia. The morning of the 14th of February, 1988, dawned bright for many people in Cologne, Germany. It was the Sunday of the street carnival in Cologne, and the parade was taking place. While the mood was bright and people were thrilled about the festivities taking place, in a small corner behind a beer stand, horror and disbelief held sway. 24-year-old Petra Nohl lay like a broken doll, strangled by an unknown assailant behind the beer stand. A young single mother, Petra Nohl was living at home with her parents and her young 1-year-old daughter. At the time, she was separated from her daughter's father and was raising the little girl as a single parent. The night before her body was found, which was February 13, 1988, she had decided to take some time for herself and spend it with friends while enjoying all the carnival had to offer. She had spent the night partying with 2 of her friends at a club named Charivari. Charivari was located in the bustling tourist village of Bierdorf, Cologne, or Beer Village, which consisted of several pubs and cafes. Charivari was situated in the basement of a mall named Ladenstadt, which has since been named to Opern Passagen. At around 4 a.m. on February 14th, Petra decided she wanted to go to another club named Big Ben. Running low on cash, she borrowed 100 Deutschmarks from one of her friends and left to go to Big Ben. Tragically, she never made it there. Instead, the morning of the parade, police officers and forensic professionals milled around her body while the parade, which was in full swing, took place only a few meters away near the Schule in Wittelsbach. While the parade was not canceled when news of the gruesome incident emerged, that particular area was cordoned off, and the police made sure no spectators were allowed accidentally or otherwise on the scene. The unsolved murder of Petra Nohl was considered one of the biggest ever cases in Cologne's criminal history. For a time, the detectives pursued any lead they found, however slim. Unfortunately, they all led to dead ends. With no new leads and no further information, the case was deemed a cold case. It looked as though Petra Nohl would never receive justice and her family would never know peace. For 34 years, the case continued to baffle the investigators. How was it that no one had noticed anything out of the ordinary? Surely, there would have been sounds of a scuffle. How could nobody have heard anything? These questions continued to plague the officers. 34 years after Petra was murdered, her case was reopened in cooperation with the Special Organizational Structure, BAO, Cold Cases of the State Criminal Police Office of North Rhine-Westphalia. The case was also featured on the ZDF show, Atkenschein XY, a television crime program, on the 7th of December 2022. This proved to be the break the investigators were looking for. Once the show was over, 5 people called and offered new leads, invigorated at the thought of finally bringing Petra's murder to justice. They investigated all the leads carefully and thoroughly. Ultimately, this resulted in a valuable tip from a possible witness, which eventually led to the arrest of a suspect. When the case was broadcast on the Atkenschein XY program in December 2022, a man at the Munich recording studio immediately came forward as a witness during the broadcast. The Cologne officials wasted no time in contacting him. During his questioning, he described in detail the course of the evening. It was the early hours of the 14th of February, 1988, and it was Carnival Saturday. He had spent some time living it up with a friend in the beer village and the Charivari nightclub. Petra Nohl was also there, celebrating Carnival Saturday. As the time of the crime grew nearer, he remembered wanting to go back home, and his friend expressed the same desire as well. In perfect accord, the two men made their way to a taxi stand in Tunestrasse. There they met Petra Nohl and struck up a friendly conversation. As it happens, taxis were in extremely short supply due to the carnival, so the group decided to move on to Neumarkt, hoping to find taxis there. As they walked and chatted, the two friends parted ways as their wait for a taxi proved to be very long. The witness remained at the stand, while his friend followed Petra in the direction of Neumarkt. The next day, the media reported on the homicide. Upon hearing what had happened, the witness wanted to go to the police and report on the happenings of the previous night. His friend at the time refused to do so quite vehemently and convinced the witness that no good would come of it. Out of respect for his friend, the witness let the matter drop and decided against making a statement to the police. 34 years later, the witness watched the show. 34 years later, the two men were no longer friends either. When he saw a photograph of Petra, he recognized her immediately and came forward with his statement. While he described the evening to the officers in explicit detail, he did not initially want to share his friend's name. The officers spoke to the witness and convinced him to do so. Forensics came forward with details which allowed them to have greater clarity on the matter. Fiber traces found on Petra indicated the murderer was probably wearing a black leather jacket, moonwash jeans, and cognac brown shoes, possibly cowboy boots. Nohl's black purse containing her neck pouch was missing. The pouch probably contained the 100 Deutschmarks borrowed from her friend and possibly also tokens used to buy drinks in the Bierdorf Cologne. On February 14, 2023, exactly 34 years to the day that Petra Nohl had been murdered, the police arrested a 56-year-old suspect from the Cologne district of Bilderstacken. The suspect's name has not been released to the public at this time. The suspect claimed that he could not remember the murder during an initial interrogation. However, his DNA profile was matched to DNA traces found on the victim. The suspect did not know Petra personally, and so the officers deduced the crime was probably one of greed by a then young 21-year-old man, too drunk and greedy to know better. At the present, the suspect has denied the crime, but he did not resist arrest. He will now be charged with the murder, and Petra's family can finally begin a long and painful journey to closure. This next case takes us to Opelika, the county seat of Lee County in the east central part of the U.S. state of Alabama. It is here in this town that is home to over 30,000 people that a chilling discovery was made in 2012. On January 28, 2012, police received a call from Yvonne Johnson detailing that her son had found something unusual while cleaning the yard. When the police reached the site at Brookhaven Trailer Park in Opelika, Alabama, they were shocked to find a toddler's skull. When they searched the area just a few miles away, behind a trailer in the adjacent lot, they were able to collect a few bones along with a small bundle of curly hair. A nearby creek had more evidence to offer the police. A pink-colored, long-sleeved shirt was found there. It had little heart buttons and flowery ruffles around the neckline. The remains were of a baby, likely to be between 4 and 7 years of age. The case was just as complex as it was brutal, so the police started out with the basics. Her remains were sent to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, to try and figure out the identity of the child and provide an autopsy report. The tragic part of the case was not over yet. The reports revealed baffling details that the remains belonged to a 4 to 7-year-old African American female child who had suffered blunt force trauma that caused more than 15 fractures in the bones of her skull, legs, arms, ribs, and shoulders. Not only that, she was also severely malnourished and showed signs of abuse, as there was evidence of her previous injuries being healed. She seemed to have had a fractured eye socket in her left eye, which led the forensic team to believe that she was blind in her left eye. Her death, considered a homicide, likely occurred between the summers of 2010 and 2011. No amount of investigation led the police to the baby's family. That was when the unnamed child was given the name Opelika's baby Jane Doe, who became beloved in the community. Everyone tried finding the answers after the detectives released the information to the public, but the mysteries of the case were not revealed. After almost 4 years, in 2016, a picture of a girl surfaced that could have been the Jane Doe. The police noticed that the picture was taken at Opelika's Greater Peace Baptist Church Bible School around 2011. The location seemed to be a match. The child looked neglected, she had a visible deformity on her eye, and the timeline fell into place too. The detectives saw a ray of hope. They believed that they would finally be able to reach baby Jane Doe's family. But all the efforts to locate the baby in the picture were proven unsuccessful. The teacher at the school could not recall the name of the child, but remembered her as a quiet person who liked to be alone and struggled to communicate with others. The church hadn't started officially registering the students, so they did not have any records for the child seen in the picture. So the detectives did the next best thing by enhancing the low-quality, grainy pictures provided by the church and publishing them so that someone could bring in useful information. The police even tried getting help from DNA testing, but the conditions of her remains did not allow any such procedure to be followed. The officers had no option but to wait for information from the public and continue their investigation. A decade passed by, but baby Jane Doe was still a mystery. During this period, between 2012 and 2022, the police went over 15,000 case files to try and find the identity of baby Jane Doe, but all their efforts were in vain. Despite thousands of tips, neither the baby nor her killer could be identified. With the development of DNA technology, in January 2022, the detectives hoped that they could extract something substantial now. A DNA profile was built on the sample collected from her scalp and hair by Othram Laboratories and Astria Forensics. The forensics case was assigned to the renowned Dr. Barbara Ray Venter. Finally, in October 2022, with the help of genetic genealogy, Dr. Barbara was successful in identifying the father of baby Jane as Lamar Vickerstaff. He was born and brought up in Opelika, Alabama, and had served in the U.S. Navy, because of which he had resided in Honolulu, Norfolk, and Jacksonville. After this discovery, the police immediately traveled to Mayport Naval Station in Jacksonville, where Lamar was stationed at the time, to inform him of his daughter's death. But he was a no-show. After waiting for several hours, the police finally tracked him down. He provided no information about baby Jane Doe's identity to the detectives. Then the police questioned his wife, Ruth Vickerstaff, who had been married to him since 2006. She informed the police that she did not know Lamar's daughter or her mother. In December 2022, despite so many failed efforts, the police did not give up. Out of all the possible matches of women linked to Lamar around 2006, they figured out that baby Jane Doe's mother was 37-year-old Sherry Wiggins, native of Norfolk, Virginia. She identified the baby as her own daughter, Amore Wiggins, who was born in 2006. The twists and turns of this case weren't over yet, as Sherry did not even know that her daughter, for whom she had been paying child support for all these years, had been missing for more than a decade. She told the officers everything that had happened after Amore's birth in 2006. Sherry met LeVar Vickerstaff at the age of 19, as they had lived in the same apartment complex. He was a 35-year-old Navy officer, and they quickly began a romantic relationship. One day, when Sherry realized that she was pregnant, they moved in together. However, the Vickerstaff family was not happy with him having a baby without getting married. Since they did not plan on getting married anytime soon, Lamar started being upset about his family all the time. Before long, he began showing aggressive tendencies towards Sherry, so Sherry planned to take some action and move out. Then, on January 1st, 2006, Amore Wiggins was born in Norfolk, Virginia. Sherry named her Amore, meaning love in Spanish, and she was full of love and smiles. Amore was a happy child who didn't cry a lot. She was smart and special, but Lamar did not seem to care about that. He didn't take any part in Amore's early life. He was always absent. So Sherry went to court to try and get full custody of her child. By that time, Lamar had married Ruth in the same year, 2006. Sherry confessed that she had made many mistakes around that time. There had been misdemeanor reports against her which did not work out in her favor at all, and the legal custody of Amore was given to her father in 2009, while Sherry was not even given a visitation allowance. She tried fighting this decision by appealing to the court for years, but in 2013, she was informed that her appeals had been exhausted. So Sherry waited. She longed for Amore to turn 18 so that she could finally see her. Sherry told the police that she was not able to be a part of her upbringing, but she had paid child support ever since 2009 to support her daughter financially, and she was happy to do whatever she could to be involved in Amore's life. Little did she know that Amore's own father would be responsible for her death. After learning all this, police tried reaching out to school boards and pediatric clinics in the states that Lamar had previously resided in, and the neighboring ones too. But they did not find any records, concluding that Amore was never enrolled in a school and was not even reported missing. Finally, on January 17, 2023, Lamar Vickerstaff was arrested for felony murder, and his wife, Ruth Vickerstaff, was taken into custody for failure to report a missing persons report. The police built a strong case against the Vickerstaffs, and the hearing was held on March 22, 2023. During the court proceedings, it was revealed that Lamar Vickerstaff had confessed on tape to killing Amore Wiggins. He wanted to keep his wife, Ruth, from being charged with anything. They also learned that Ruth had once made a call to Child Protective Services anonymously. Later, she confronted Lamar about how she felt overwhelmed by the child and told him to give Amore to another member of his family. Lamar was looking to strike a deal of some kind with the police by offering these details in exchange for his wife's innocence. Then Lamar took Amore from Virginia, where he was stationed at the time, to Opelika and just drove around without giving any further details about how he murdered her. Lamar told the police that he tried resuscitating her. Lamar was held without bond, and Ruth had to wear an ankle monitor and stay within Duval County. They will be seeing a grand jury, the date of which will be released by the department later. If convicted, Lamar will be sentenced to life in prison without parole or even the death penalty, while Ruth could face up to 10 years in prison. The police requested people to come forward and provide information in the case of Amore Wiggins, an innocent child who did not live a happy life that was also brutally cut short by her own father. Opelika's baby Jane Doe was officially identified as Amore Jove Wiggins on January 19, 2023 by teary-eyed officers who had spent years on her case. She would have been 17 years old in 2023. Sherry thought that she was just a year away from meeting her daughter when the police came knocking at her door and informed her that Amore had been dead for over a decade. Sherry organized a memorial for her late daughter in February of 2023. Everyone showed up in pink and red attire, honoring her name, Amore. The tearful mother said, "She has a name, say it loud, Amore Jove Wiggins." She read out a poem in the loving memory of her daughter. "I wish I could hold your hand and kiss your cheek, just to let you know how much you mean to me." Detective Alfred White, who did not give up hope on Amore's case, also attended the services. He gave a heartfelt message to her, remembering how much she meant to the Opelika Police Department. "Amore, we love you. We do. We all love you, Amore. If you didn't get to hear from the people who had you last, you can hear it from here. We love you." Geelong is a picturesque city on the western coast of Australia. Nestled in the state of Victoria, this city boasts stunning beaches, verdant parks, and a vibrant cultural scene that draws visitors from all over the world. Its scenic beauty and rich history have earned it a reputation as one of Australia's premier tourist destinations. But beneath the surface of Geelong's serene exterior lies a darker side. In 1992, the city was rocked by the murder of Annette Steward, a young woman whose life was cut tragically short. The heinous crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents fearful and on edge. Despite exhaustive investigations, the perpetrator remained at large, and the case went cold, haunting the city for over 30 years. Annette Steward was born in 1963 in Australia to Roy and Margaret Steward. Growing up, she shared her home with her two sisters, Jillian and Jeanette, who she had a very strong bond with. Their home was full of love and laughter, and their parents adored their three daughters with all their heart. In her late teens, she had her first child, a daughter named Jacinta, who became the apple of her eye. 3 years later, she had another child, this time a son, who she named Aaron. She raised the two of them as a single mother and worked at the Point Henry ammunition factory, which allowed her to provide a good life for both her and her children. The three of them lived together in 1992 in a home on Hope Street in Geelong West. Sadly, this is where the tragedy would occur. On March 18, 1992, a friend entered Annette's home after being unable to get in touch with her. When they heard no response after calling out, they went into Annette's bedroom to see if she was there. what they saw would haunt them forever. They saw Annette's naked body sprawled out in an unnatural position on the bed, lifeless and certainly dead. In a state of shock, they phoned the police, and the investigation began soon afterwards. As the investigation into Annette Steward's death began, it was discovered that the 29-year-old had left work at Point Henry around 4:30 p.m. the day before her lifeless body was found in her home. There was also foreign DNA found at the crime scene, though its nature was never specified. As the investigators delved deeper, they turned to Annette's family and friends for answers. It was during these interviews that they uncovered a startling fact. Annette had shared a meal with 4 friends at her home the night before her body was found. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. How could 4 people have been in her home just hours before she died, and yet no one had noticed anything amiss? The truth about Annette Steward's death was finally revealed after an autopsy was conducted. She had been strangled to death, and the case was ruled a homicide. Annette Steward's tragic death not only left her friends and family devastated, but it also had a profound impact on her 2 children, Jacinta and Aaron. Jacinta was 13 years old at the time of her mother's death, and her brother Aaron was only 10. Despite the best efforts of the investigators working on Annette's case, the truth remained elusive. As time passed, leads dried up and the trail grew colder. The case became one of many in the growing list of unsolved mysteries. In 2007, a tragic and disturbing event unfolded within the murder case of Annette. Investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, and their efforts led a coroner to pinpoint a co-worker as the primary suspect. Annette was a valued employee at the Point Henry ammunition factory. Despite this lead, justice was never fully served, as no charges were ultimately pressed. In 2015, a glimmer of hope emerged in this long-standing quest for justice in the case of Annette's murder. In an effort to encourage those with information to come forward, the Victoria Police offered a reward of a staggering $1 million. Annette's children also made a heartfelt plea to the public, imploring anyone with information about their mother's death to step forward. Darren John Chalmers, a 54-year-old man from Western Australia, was charged on March 14, 2023, with the 1992 murder of Annette Steward in Geelong, Victoria. According to reports, Chalmers had been a person of interest in the case for some time, and in 2019, police obtained a DNA sample from him that matched the DNA found at the crime scene. This breakthrough led to Chalmers' arrest and extradition from Western Australia to Victoria to face charges. Chalmers is a former truck driver who had lived in the Geelong area at the time of Steward's murder. He had no previous criminal record and was not known to Steward. His arrest came as a shock to those who knew him, with some describing him as a quiet and unassuming man. The news of the arrest brought renewed attention to this case and a renewed sense of hope that justice would finally be served. Following his extradition to Victoria, the man was remanded in custody until his appearance in the Melbourne Magistrates Court on March 20, 2023. He made a virtual appearance in Melbourne Magistrates Court, wearing glasses, and lush green fields could be seen in the background as he connected to the courtroom via video link from jail. Chalmers has been ordered to remain in custody, and his next court appearance is scheduled for June 2023. In the event that Chalmers is found guilty of Annette Steward's murder, he could be facing a lifetime in prison. Although it may not bring Annette back, it would at least provide a sense of closure for her family and friends who have suffered her loss and waited for so long to see justice served. Harlem, New York is where our next case begins. It is a neighborhood in Upper Manhattan, New York City, well known for its intimate jazz clubs, soul food institutions, and African American heritage. But it was here that a horrific double murder took place in 1994. It was a case that instilled fear in everyone living in the Grant Houses complex on 125th Street in Harlem, New York, when 57-year-old Sarah Roberts and her 26-year-old daughter, Sharon Roberts, were discovered dead in their apartment on February 20th, 1994. The murderer remained a mystery for 29 years until 2023. Sarah Roberts lived with her daughter, Sharon Roberts, at West 125th Street in Harlem, away from the rest of their family. A caregiver named Celeste Cornelius was appointed to provide support for both of them, as Sarah suffered from severe emphysema and Sharon had a mental disability. Therefore, both Sarah and Sharon relied on Celeste for many things. It was February 20th, 1994, when Celeste reached their sixth-floor apartment to find that the door was unlocked. With previous incidences of robbery in the complex, it was a matter of worry to her. As she went inside, she heard no sound, none at all. That's when Celeste rushed to the bedroom and found Sarah lying on the bed, dead. She rushed in to check on Sharon in terror. Sharon, too, was laid out on the floor with a pair of woolen leggings around her neck. Both the women were dead. The sight horrified Celeste, who went to the neighbors for help and called 911. The police arrived at the scene at 10:15 p.m. and noticed the following things. There were no signs of forced entry, meaning that the killer was likely a familiar face, and the place was raided in such a way that the killer knew where the most precious items would be, meaning the killer had been in the apartment before. And lastly, both the women seemed ill and weak, meaning they could not have defended themselves. Now the officers relied on Celeste, who had found the bodies, for more information. She told them that she had been providing care for both of the women who had been slain. She told the detectives that she spoke to Sarah the previous night around 8 p.m. Later, she tried contacting them, but did not get a response. She tried again the next morning and around noon, but could not reach them. This was when she became worried and decided to check on them herself. What she found would turn out to be a 29-year-old long mystery. When the autopsy report came back, it revealed that they were both strangled to death using the tube from Sarah's oxygen tank. The cause of death was ruled as asphyxia. Hoping to find the killer, the police collected all the evidence available at the time at the crime scene, including some cigarette butts, which could not have been in their apartment if the killer had not left them. Because of Sarah and Sharon's medical condition, it was highly unlikely for the police to find cigarettes at their place. They collected a dry secretion swab from Sharon's hand. Along with this, they collected nail clippings from both the victims to extract any possible DNA that might belong to the murderer. As the police found the place to be completely ransacked, with no sign of forced entry, their main suspect would be someone who Sarah and Sharon were familiar with. The neighbors, frequent visitors, and Sarah's acquaintances were all questioned. The detectives talked to a neighbor who did not want to be named. She said that someone broke into Sarah and Sharon's apartment a week before Christmas and took away hundreds of dollars and a VHS cassette player with tapes. After this, Sarah installed a third lock in her apartment. The neighbor also referred to Sarah as very sickly, as she had oxygen tanks delivered to her place quite often, which were sometimes mistakenly sent to the neighbor's house. In fact, she needed support from her caretaker, who used to hold Sarah's hand to help her walk and get around. The police suspected that the murders were linked to the robbery. They thought that the previous robbery in the apartment could have given a strong motive to the robber to return and strike again. An intensive investigation followed, but all efforts fell short. Even the DNA evidence did not show any results in the database, so the case eventually turned cold. The year 2022 provided a major breakthrough in the murder case of Sarah and Sharon. Technology had evolved, and it gave the police the capability to solve a crime and catch the culprit. And that is what they did. When the crime site DNA was run through the national database again, it showed a perfect match to a 64-year-old man, Larry Atkinson, a man who lived in Harlem, just 13 blocks away from the site of the murders. When the officers from the NYPD Bronx Cold Case Squad reached his residence to arrest him on the morning of January 23, 2023, they found that he had been staying with his long-term partner, Celeste Cornelius, none other than the caretaker of Sarah and Sharon. They had been dating in 1984 when the murders happened, but neither Celeste nor Larry had been regarded as potential suspects in the original investigation. The story was not over yet. When Larry's background was checked, the police found that he was a convicted felon who had been in and out of jail since 1985 for several offenses. He had around 13 arrests and 5 convictions under his name for attempted robbery, drug use and sale, and assault. He served time under different aliases. He was in jail for 2 years due to a drug offense case and received parole in 2013. It was during his last arrest that his DNA was submitted to the national database. The police had found the killer of 2 innocent, harmless, vulnerable women who died terribly. Larry Atkinson was being taken to the police station when he informed the detectives that he was not feeling well. Larry had been diagnosed with cancer. He was taken to the hospital and then to the police station in a wheelchair with an oxygen mask.
After his arrest for the strangulation deaths of a mother and daughter in their Harlem apartment in 1994.
However, she was informed Celeste, his partner, insisted that he didn't about the DNA match, but she did not believe that Larry could have killed Sarah and her daughter. She said, "I don't want you to misquote me, but I know he didn't do it. I don't care about the DNA, none of that mess. He didn't do it." Celeste and Larry's neighbor, Juliet Wilson, said that the couple had been living together for about 20 years without fighting at all. She seemed to believe that Larry was a nice guy. The news of his arrest came as a shock to her, but the police maintained their stance and believed that Larry was a cold-blooded killer. Although they could not narrow down the motive or if he was let in the apartment, Larry was tried. He tried defending himself by claiming, "You got the wrong person in jail. I'm not guilty." But on January 27, 2023, Manhattan Supreme Court Judge Alethea Drysdale charged him with the murders of Sarah and Sharon without offering bail. Although the killer is behind bars under medical supervision, the case remains open for further investigation. Next, we travel to Gainesville, the county seat of Hall County in the state of Georgia in the United States. It is often called the poultry capital of the world due to its large number of poultry processing plants, and it was here in 1989 that a tragic murder was committed. Mary Louicile Willfong, a mother of 3, was residing in Gainesville, Georgia in 1989. She was known to enjoy life and take one day at a time. She liked hitchhiking, and more often than not, she rode with truck drivers. Her mother described her as a base hopper because Mary liked military bases and military men. She lived a free and carefree lifestyle, but did not know what awaited her. On November 21, 1989, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office received a call from a group of deer hunters after they had discovered a body in a wooded area off the Johnstonville Road off the I-75, which was just about 50 miles south of Atlanta. When the police reached the location, they were able to identify the victim as a 23-year-old missing woman, Mary Louicile Willfong, who had been reported missing on November 19, 1989. The case was deeply complex, as the woman had already been missing from a truck shop for over 2 days. Then her dead body was found in the woods, in a spine-chilling state. The autopsy revealed that she had been sexually assaulted, then strangled. It was unimaginable what harrowing events she witnessed and faced in her last moments. Therefore, the police were determined to find the killer. They set out to find any witnesses who might have seen Mary. Luckily, the police were able to receive some useful tips. There were some witnesses who had seen her at a farmer's market in Forest Park, 47 miles away in the southern region of Atlanta. The deputies found out that she had been seen entering a tractor-trailer with an unidentified white man. The police searched and searched to find a suspect. They collected DNA evidence from Mary's body, but it showed no match for the possible suspects. So despite all their efforts in the investigation, in the end, the police had no leads about who could have murdered her. Ultimately, the case went cold. But all hope was not lost, as Monroe County Sheriff Freeman assigned the case to the investigator Mark Mansfield on March 11, 2019. He was instructed to reopen the case. New technology enabled the investigators to re-examine the initial evidence. Mark submitted the evidence to the GBI Crime Lab, the same evidence that was also sent to the DNA International, a company based in Miami, Florida, so that they could zero in on the correct suspect. Mansfield got in touch with Special Agent Tim Burke of the FBI Atlanta team to collaborate on the case. After more than 3 decades in early 2023, the police found a match using genetic genealogy. Larry Paget, a 59-year-old man residing in Louicile, Indiana, was identified as a suspect. He would have been around 25 years of age when he committed the crime, and he, in fact, used to drive tractor-trailers at the time of the murder of Mary Louicile Willfong. So finally, an arrest warrant was issued. Then, on March 1, 2023, Mark Mansfield and a local Indiana law enforcement officer, Sergeant Kimian Colivard, drove up to Washington, Indiana, to find justice for Mary. They arrested Larry Paget for the murder and sexual assault of Mary Willfong. More evidence was collected by the FBI Evidence Recovery Team and Washington PD. GBI Crime Lab retrieved the DNA proof and confirmed the match, which revealed additional evidence linking Larry to the murder. Larry is being detained in Indiana until the waiver of extradition can be signed, which will bring him back to Georgia for further procedures. Larry probably thought that he would never be apprehended and that he had gotten away with murder for more than 30 years. It definitely took time, but justice was finally served for Mary. Our next case today takes us to the mile-high city, Denver, the state capital of Colorado. In 1996, a horrific murder took place here, disturbing the peace of mind of many who lived within the city. But before we get there, we must go back to the beginning. On May 14, 1961, U.S. Air Force Sergeant and Vietnam War veteran James C. Turachak welcomed his first child into the world, a beautiful girl named Terri Turachak. A few years later, he had a son who he named James Jr. Terri and her younger brother shared a happy childhood and were practically inseparable. When they grew up and began their own families, Terri had 3 lovely children of her own, but neither their names nor the identity of their father is known. Her brother James remembers her as being a great mom to the kids. Terri was 35 years old and residing at 1927 East 17th Avenue in Denver in 1996. Terri was in a relationship with an unidentified man, but was also known to have other relationships on the side. Terri's life was going good, but she had no idea what fate had in store for her in the near future. October 15th, 1996 was a sleepy Saturday in Denver, Colorado. The previous night, Terri had planned a fun Friday out with her friends, as her kids were away and she had a rare night out for herself. She had gotten done with work and then gone home and got ready for her night out and left her house around 8 p.m. The next morning, Terri's apartment door lay suspiciously open, but it was only after midday at 12:40 p.m. that a neighbor had noticed this and went to see if everything was all right inside. When they called out and got no response, they slowly approached the bedroom. When they entered the room, they were shocked to find Terri laying face down on the floor. When Terri did not respond after being shaken, they rushed outside and dialed 911 to report that she was dead. Homicide detectives Joe Tennant and Joe Dermott from the Denver Police Department took the lead on the case. In the bedroom where Terri's body was discovered, they discovered evidence of a struggle. They also gathered from the neighbors that between 1 and 1:30 a.m. that day, there had been some sort of commotion in Terri's flat. The flat showed no indications of being broken into, and it appeared as though the murderer had simply strolled out and left the door open as they were leaving. They discovered that no one had seen someone leave around that time when they asked the other residents. Medical examiner Dr. T. Henry later performed an autopsy on the body. He had discovered that Terri had been strangled and that she had also suffered blunt force trauma to her head and face. He recovered hair from her right thigh, which detectives believed came from the killer. He also found evidence that she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. The case was ruled a homicide, and an investigation began to catch the killer. In order to learn more about Terri's whereabouts, as well as to determine whether anyone in the building had seen or heard anything strange, the investigators spoke with her friends, relatives, and neighbors. They discovered a number of odd facts regarding Terri's last night alive. Around 11:30 p.m., a neighbor had seen Terri entering the building, and she had not been alone, but was with an African-American male. Another neighbor reported that around 12:30 a.m., they had heard a disturbance and shouting coming from Terri's flat. Another neighbor reported that Terri knocked on her door at 1 a.m. to ask for money, and at the time, Terri seemed to be injured. When he left to pick up his girlfriend at 3:30 a.m., the neighbor who had heard the noise coming from her home also noticed that her apartment door was left open. Detectives believed Terri was killed at approximately 1:30 a.m. based on these reports. They also spoke to Terri's boyfriend, whose name was not released to the public. He told them that on the night of her death, he had been staying at his mother's house. He also told them that a week before her death, there had been an armed robbery by 3 men that had taken place inside Terri's home. The detectives now had a number of leads to follow, and they were especially interested in the man who had accompanied Terri home the night that she had died. However, even though they followed all these leads to the best of their abilities, they eventually led nowhere, and the case went cold. In August 2004, 8 years after the murder, the case was reopened when suddenly there was a match within the COIDES system for the foreign DNA that had been removed from the crime scene. The match was for a criminal named Ricky Dawson, who was already serving a 25-year sentence for a second-degree murder charge at the time. When police looked to see if he had been mentioned during the original investigation, he was nowhere to be found. But he did match the description of the man who Terri's neighbors had seen with her the night she died. Detectives then went to interview him at the Suwannee Correctional Institution in Florida, where he was serving his sentence. The exact contents of the interview between the detectives and Dawson have not been released to the public, but after the interview, police conducted one final DNA test by testing new samples of DNA they had taken from Dawson against the hair they had recovered on Terri's body, and it matched the hair's major DNA profile. Satisfied with this, police could have now charged Dawson with Terri's murder, but for whatever reason, perhaps because Dawson still had 2 decades left on his sentence, this was not done, and the case remained dormant for over another decade. Detective John McGrail of the Denver Police Cold Case Unit was given the file for a follow-up investigation 14 years later, a total of 22 long years after Terri's murder. He looked over the case file and discovered that it was basically an open and shut case. He subsequently filed for additional laboratory evaluation on the case in December 2018 in light of the evidence found at the scene and the victim's post-mortem assessment. The DNA once more revealed a conclusive match to Ricky Dawson in August 2019. Ultimately, on January 26, 2023, a warrant for Ricky Dawson's arrest was issued on the accusation of first-degree murder. He was 62 years old and still incarcerated in Florida on a charge of second-degree murder. The Denver Police Department extradited him from Florida to Denver, where he was informed of the charges against him on February 23rd. He is widely expected to be found guilty once the case goes to trial. Denver, Colorado is a vibrant and bustling city in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, known for its stunning scenery, rich history, and diverse culture. Denver is a popular destination for tourists and locals alike. However, the city's idyllic reputation was shattered on August 15, 2015, when Jose Frias Olivas, a 61-year-old man, was murdered. For years, his case remained unsolved, leaving his family and friends without closure. But in a recent development, a plea deal was reached with a suspected Denver gang member in connection with the case. The details of this crime are chilling. On August 28, 2015, Jose Frias Olivas was found dead on South Federal Boulevard and West Vassar Avenue in Denver. He had been shot in the back of the head, and the motive for the killing was not immediately clear. Jose Frias Olivas was 61 years old at the time of his death and was described as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help others. His murder left his family devastated and searching for answers. On August 15, 2015, Jose Frias Olivas was visiting his daughter. It was a beautiful morning in Denver, and Jose decided to take a leisurely walk in the park and left his daughter's home, supposed to be a peaceful stroll, turned into a nightmare when he was shot while walking through Harvard Gulch Park in broad daylight close to Federal Boulevard. On that fateful day, the police rushed to the intersection of South Federal Boulevard and West Vassar Avenue at 10:30 a.m., following reports of a shooting. To their horror, they discovered Frias Olivas lying face down with a fatal gunshot wound to the back of his head. Despite their best efforts, he was declared dead at the scene, leaving everyone reeling from the tragedy. Jose Frias Olivas was an ordinary person, a retiree who enjoyed taking walks in the park and spending time with his loved ones. But on that fateful day, he became a victim of senseless violence, a tragedy that shook his family and the community to their core. His murder was not only shocking, but also incomprehensible. How could someone so harmless and unassuming fall victim to such a heinous crime, and in broad daylight and in public of all places? The killing of Frias, who was unarmed and alone at the time, left many people perplexed and questioning why anyone would choose to take the life of an innocent individual. The community and his family were deeply shocked by his tragic and unexpected demise. No one could have imagined that a simple stroll in the park would lead to such a horrific and fatal outcome. Denver has a diverse culture with Western Hispanic and Native American influences, known for its vibrant arts, music, and outdoor recreational opportunities. The community is resilient and determined, but this recent act of violence served as a reminder to stay vigilant despite low crime rates in safe neighborhoods. The murder of Jose Frias Olivas was an unexpected and tragic event that shook the Denver community to its core. The killer left no clear motive and seemingly disappeared without a trace. Following the initial investigation, the Denver Police Crime Scene Unit conducted a thorough search of the area. It was during this search that they discovered a single Remington .22 caliber cartridge case on the trail located just east of Frias Olivas' lifeless body. This crucial piece of evidence gave investigators a vital lead to pursue in their efforts to track down those responsible for the tragedy. Eyewitness accounts also shed some light on the shocking incident. Several people reported hearing 2 to 3 gunshots and saw multiple individuals fleeing the area in panic shortly after the shots rang out. One of the witnesses reported a peculiar detail that could prove to be a vital clue in the investigation. They described one of the suspects as having tattoos on his face, including one over his eye, that resembled the claw marks featured on Monster energy drinks. This particular detail can narrow down the proof of potential suspects and bring investigators one step closer to justice for the tragic deaths of Frias Olivas. Furthermore, detectives made a significant breakthrough in the case after discovering a Ruger handgun and a seized Acura. Ballistic tests confirmed that the .22 casing found at the crime scene matched the gun. The discovery that the gun had been reported stolen added weight to the evidence against the suspects. The investigation also uncovered DNA evidence from the murder weapons magazine, providing another crucial piece of evidence in the case. And it was in September 2016 that detectives discovered DNA from the murder weapons magazine matched a profile present in COIDUS, the Combined DNA Index System database, and identified them as the homicide suspect. It was matched with a man named Nicholas Lujan. Despite detectives noticing Nicholas Lujan's distinctive claw mark tattoo on his face when he was arrested for robbery in October 2015, witnesses were hesitant to cooperate with the investigation. They identified Nicholas as a member of the notorious GKI street gang who went by the moniker Caesar, according to the affidavit. This highlights the fear and reluctance of witnesses to come forward, especially when the suspect is associated with a violent gang. The lack of cooperation made it harder for the police to solve the case and bring justice to the victim and their family. Due to the fear of retaliation from the alleged killer and his associates, witnesses were reluctant to come forward and identify the suspect. This lack of cooperation from the witnesses caused the case to go cold, with little progress made in the investigation. Years after Frias' death, the tip that came in via Crime Stoppers in 2017 was a significant breakthrough in the Frias Olivas murder case. The informant provided detailed information about Lujan's alleged confession, stating that he had bragged about the murder and how he had gotten away with it. This new information gave investigators a critical lead to pursue and provide them with a valuable starting point for their investigation. With this new lead, investigators were able to focus their efforts on building a stronger case against Nicholas. They conducted further interviews, reviewed evidence, and followed up on leads. In 2018, investigators made significant progress in the case by obtaining a DNA sample from Lujan while he was serving time for a robbery conviction at the Limon Correctional Facility, matched the DNA found in the Ruger magazine, providing strong evidence linking Nicholas to the crime. Additionally, a witness was able to identify Nicholas from a photo lineup as one of the individuals seen fleeing the scene of the crime on the day of the shooting. These developments were crucial in building a case against Nicholas. According to the affidavit, one of the suspects in the group later revealed to detectives that Nicholas had fled to a nearby apartment and cleaned his hands with bleach after the incident, and also cleaned the gun. However, the magazine was overlooked, and it was only later discovered to have Nicholas's DNA on it. This evidence further strengthened the case against Nicholas and helped investigators build a solid case for his prosecution. The discovery of this vital piece of evidence would ultimately lead to Lujan's arrest in 2021. And finally, on March 10, 2023, Nicholas pleaded guilty to one count of second-degree murder. According to a news release from the Denver's District Attorney Office, he is scheduled to be sentenced on June 9, 2023. Denver District Attorney Beth McCann expressed her pride in the work of the Cold Case Unit and the Denver Police Department in a news release regarding their efforts in bringing justice to Mr. Frias Olivas. McCann acknowledged the heinous nature of the murder and recognized the dedication and persistence of law enforcement in solving the case. In the case of Jose Frias Olivas, the Denver Police Department and the Cold Case Unit worked tirelessly to bring justice to his family and loved ones, and we hope that they have received some form of closure. On September 28, 1979, a reporter at the Tahoe Tribune received a chilling anonymous call. The voice on the other end of the line told the reporter that there was a body at the Sugar Pine Point State Park in El Dorado County, California. Without hesitation, the reporter sprang into action and immediately alerted the sheriff's deputies. Detectives were quick to arrive at the scene, and to their horror, the tip turned out to be true. There, in the picnic area, lay the lifeless body of a woman. She appeared to be in her mid-30s or early 40s and wore a red shirt and jeans. Her golden wedding band shone brightly in the sunlight. 2 other rings adorned her fingers, and a necklace with what resembled a deer pendant hung around her neck. It was immediately evident to the detectives that the woman had met a violent end. She had clearly been beaten to death, and beside her body lay a single discarded flip-flop. The detectives speculated that she had likely been chased through the park and lost her other flip-flop in the process. As they scoured the area for clues, the detectives stumbled upon a beer bottle not far from the woman's body. They collected it as evidence, along with a sexual assault kit and a DNA sample. They also carefully searched the woman's clothing for any clues that might help identify her. But despite their thorough examination, they came up empty-handed. The woman had no means of identification on her person. With no immediate leads, the woman's body was removed from the scene and taken for an autopsy. The results of the examination were shocking. It was determined that the cause of death was strangulation and severe beating, confirming the detective's suspicions that she had been the victim of a brutal attack. Determined to uncover the identity of the woman and bring her assailant to justice, the detectives launched a full-scale investigation. They combed through missing person reports and interviewed witnesses in the area, determined to find any shred of evidence that could lead them to the perpetrator. As the investigation continued, the detectives were able to track down the individuals who made the initial call to the reporter. There were 3 of them, and they all explained that they had wanted to report it themselves, but feared arrest due to their outstanding warrants. None of them were held as suspects in the case. Despite numerous tips pouring in, the detectives were still unable to identify the slain woman. One particularly promising lead revealed that she had lived in a motel in South Lake Tahoe and had won a substantial sum of money playing Keno shortly before her murder. The detectives scoured local casinos for potential leads, but came up empty-handed. As time passed, the case grew colder and no arrests were made. The identity of the woman remained unknown, and she was buried in an unmarked grave in Tahoma, California, simply labeled as unknown female. It was a tragic end for a woman whose life had been cut short by a senseless act of violence. The case of the unidentified woman remained a thorn in the side of detectives for decades, until 2014, when a new lead emerged. Detective John Gaines, a member of the Cold Case Homicide Unit of El Dorado County, took up the challenge of solving the mystery that had remained unsolved for so long. As he delved deeper into the case, he discovered an overlooked piece of evidence, and this was the necklace worn by the victim. It had been previously classified as a deer necklace, but Detective Gaines recognized it as a chai necklace, a Hebrew symbol that means life. This revelation sparked an idea in his mind. The victim might have been Jewish. With this knowledge in hand, the detectives reached out to the Jewish community for help in solving this case. They contacted several Jewish centers in the area, including the Chabad Jewish Center of Lake Tahoe and a Chabad Center covering Folsom, Placerville, and other nearby regions. Photographs of the victim's jewelry were also published in a Jewish newspaper, in the hope that someone would recognize and provide a clue that could crack the case wide open. The renewed investigation breathed new life into the case, and the detectives remained hopeful that they would finally unravel the mystery that had eluded them for so long. In 2015, detectives finally caught a break in the case. A 61-year-old woman saw the photographs of the jewelry in the newspaper and recognized it as the type her mother used to wear. She reached out to detectives, believing that the unidentified woman might be her mother, who went by the name Patricia Carnahan. To confirm this, detectives exhumed the unidentified woman's body to take a DNA sample for testing. When the DNA of the unidentified woman and the 61-year-old woman claiming to be her daughter were compared, it was a match. The mystery of the woman's identity had been solved. She was indeed Patricia Carnahan. Further investigation revealed that Patricia was from Virginia and had been 35 years old when she met her end. In 1979, she had been visiting California in a red Volkswagen bus, traveling alone. Her family had lost contact with her at some point, and her Volkswagen was later found abandoned at a car dealership in Venice, California. Her family had reported her missing about a month after her death, of which they were unaware. With Patricia's identity finally confirmed, her body was released to her family for a proper burial, finally giving them a bit of closure after more than 3 decades of not knowing what had happened to her. After finally uncovering the identity of the mysterious victim, detectives were left with an even greater mystery. Who had killed Patricia? They had to find the killer and bring justice to the victim. With determination in their hearts, the detectives delved into the case. They started by testing the DNA sample collected from Patricia's body all those years ago, and finally, a DNA profile was developed. Upon testing the beer bottle found near the body, they discovered that the DNA matched the one found in Patricia's body. This confirmed that the killer had used the bottle. Despite uploading the DNA profile to CODIS, the detectives were left disappointed when they found no match, but they refused to give up. In the year 2022, the Washington State Attorney General's office decided to take on the mammoth task of addressing the backlog of untested sexual assault kits in the state. Among the 1,500 untested kits sitting in the Spokane Police Department storage room were the remains of a 1994 sexual assault case. The case involved a homeless woman who accused a man named Harold Carpenter of assaulting her. Healthcare workers had collected evidence as part of a sexual assault kit, and detectives arrested Carpenter at that time. But the case took a strange turn when Carpenter claimed that the sex was consensual and that the woman had stolen his wallet. The detectives collected DNA from Carpenter before releasing him from jail, but their investigation was suspended later that week when they lost contact with the woman. For decades, the woman's sexual assault kit sat untested until August 2022, when it was sent to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab as a part of the Washington State Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. In early February 2023, Spokane police detectives were jolted by an incredible revelation. A forensic scientist with the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab reached out to them that the DNA from the 1994 case had been uploaded to the FBI's DNA database, TIMECODES, and it had matched the DNA evidence collected from none other than Patricia's case. And this meant that the suspect in her murder was Carpenter, the man accused of the 1994 sexual assault. With this news, the detectives dug deeper into Carpenter's past and discovered that he had been arrested in Susanville, California on September 29, 1979, on suspicion of driving under the influence, just one day after Patricia's body was found. He had been released to the Bonneville County Sheriff in Idaho, where he served time for an unrelated burglary charge. Carpenter's criminal record was extensive, including several misdemeanors, an arrest in Bonner County from 1998 to 2018, such as drug possession, disturbing the peace, reckless driving, and driving under the influence. The story of Carpenter's life took an even darker turn when the detectives discovered that he had been homeless in Spokane since around 2016 and had moved into the Park Tower Apartments, a low-income building for elderly and disabled people. Shockingly, in 2018, Carpenter was a prime suspect in another sexual assault case in Spokane County, and, to make matters worse, he was also suspected of an unwanted sexual touching incident in 2022, but no arrest was made in either case. On February 27, 2023, the Spokane Police, in collaboration with the El Dorado County Cold Case Task Force, made a long and awaited arrest. After more than 4 decades of evading justice, 63-year-old Carpenter was finally apprehended. He was booked into the Spokane County Jail, charged with being a fugitive, and is awaiting extradition to California, where he will face a murder charge. The next day, Carpenter made his first court appearance in Spokane, where he was remanded in custody on a $1 million bail. Although the statute of limitations has expired in the 1994 sexual assault case, and the victim has since passed away, authorities remain resolute that Patricia's murder case will continue to move forward, and Carpenter will finally be held accountable for his heinous crimes. Deep in the heart of Harris County, Texas, lies the vibrant and diverse city of Houston. Known for its iconic landmarks, rich culture, and bustling economy, Houston is a place where dreams come to life and the impossible becomes possible. But hidden amidst the city's beauty lies a dark and tragic tale. April 24, 2009 was a day that left the community of Houston reeling with shock and disbelief. It was the day when the lifeless body of Domitila Alvarez, a 38-year-old woman, was discovered in the office of her family's auto repair shop on B Street in West Houston, Texas. The gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the community, leaving them grappling with the sudden loss of a beloved member. The investigation revealed that she had been stabbed multiple times, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a family and community in mourning. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? Why was Domitila a target of the killer? Her life slipped away before paramedics arrived, leaving the investigation with the arduous task of piecing together what happened. They combed through every inch of the scene and conducted a painstaking investigation, but unfortunately, it yielded minimal leads. There was foreign DNA found at the scene, but the nature of it was never revealed to the public, and since no suspects were identified, it is assumed that there were no matches in the system. The mystery of her untimely death lingered, leaving many to wonder who was responsible for her demise. The investigation hit a dead end as no suspects emerged, causing the case to go cold and leaving investigators scratching their heads. Despite their tireless efforts, they were unable to unearth any new information, and the case remained unresolved, shrouded in a veil of mystery. After years of uncertainty, a glimmer of hope emerged in 2021 when the Houston Police Department Homicide Division Cold Case Squad re-examined the evidence in Domitila's case as a part of a case review project. Thanks to the advancements in technology, investigators were able to use DNA evidence found at the scene of the crime to make a major breakthrough in the case. The evidence led them to Jorge Trevino Cardenas, a suspect who had eluded them for so long. How exactly this DNA evidence led to him has not been released to the public. The discovery of Jorge Trevino Cardenas as a suspect was like finding a needle in a haystack, but investigators refused to let the case go cold this time. Their persistence paid off when further investigations uncovered additional information that implicated him in the case. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, giving investigators a clearer picture of what happened to Domitila Alvarez. Armed with this newfound evidence, Cardenas was charged on January 26, 2023, making a significant milestone in the case. Jorge Trevino Cardenas, a 50-year-old suspect, faced the full weight of the law when he was charged with the murder in the 185th State District Court for his alleged role in the tragic death of Domitila Alvarez. It was also revealed that he was already serving a sentence for an unrelated crime in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice William R. Boyd Unit prison, raising troubling questions about the extent of his criminal activities. Despite this, the wheels of justice continued to turn, undeterred by Cardenas's previous convictions. Finally, justice had caught up with the suspect, and he was paying the price for both crimes. The news provided some measure of comfort to the community and Alvarez's, who could take solace in knowing the perpetrator was off the streets and would never harm anyone again. Deep in the heart of Harris County, Texas, lies the vibrant and diverse city of Houston. Known for its iconic landmarks, rich culture, and bustling economy, Houston is a place where dreams come to life and the impossible becomes possible. But hidden amidst the city's beauty lies a dark and tragic tale. April 24, 2009 was a day that left the community of Houston reeling with shock and disbelief. It was the day when the lifeless body of Domitila Alvarez, a 38-year-old woman, was discovered in the office of her family's auto repair shop on B Street in West Houston, Texas. The gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the community, leaving them grappling with the sudden loss of a beloved member. The investigation revealed that she had been stabbed multiple times, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a family and community in mourning. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? Why was Domitila a target of the killer? Her life slipped away before paramedics arrived, leaving the investigation with the arduous task of piecing together what happened. They combed through every inch of the scene and conducted a painstaking investigation, but unfortunately, it yielded minimal leads. There was foreign DNA found at the scene, but the nature of it was never revealed to the public, and since no suspects were identified, it is assumed that there were no matches in the system. The mystery of her untimely death lingered, leaving many to wonder who was responsible for her demise. The investigation hit a dead end as no suspects emerged, causing the case to go cold and leaving investigators scratching their heads. Despite their tireless efforts, they were unable to unearth any new information, and the case remained unresolved, shrouded in a veil of mystery. After years of uncertainty, a glimmer of hope emerged in 2021 when the Houston Police Department Homicide Division Cold Case Squad re-examined the evidence in Domitila's case as a part of a case review project. Thanks to the advancements in technology, investigators were able to use DNA evidence found at the scene of the crime to make a major breakthrough in the case. The evidence led them to Jorge Trevino Cardenas, a suspect who had eluded them for so long. How exactly this DNA evidence led to him has not been released to the public. The discovery of Jorge Trevino Cardenas as a suspect was like finding a needle in a haystack, but investigators refused to let the case go cold this time. Their persistence paid off when further investigations uncovered additional information that implicated him in the case. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, giving investigators a clearer picture of what happened to Domitila Alvarez. Armed with this newfound evidence, Cardenas was charged on January 26, 2023, making a significant milestone in the case. Jorge Trevino Cardenas, a 50-year-old suspect, faced the full weight of the law when he was charged with the murder in the 185th State District Court for his alleged role in the tragic death of Domitila Alvarez. It was also revealed that he was already serving a sentence for an unrelated crime in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice William R. Boyd Unit prison, raising troubling questions about the extent of his criminal activities. Despite this, the wheels of justice continued to turn, undeterred by Cardenas's previous convictions. Finally, justice had caught up with the suspect, and he was paying the price for both crimes. The news provided some measure of comfort to the community and Alvarez's, who could take solace in knowing the perpetrator was off the streets and would never harm anyone again. Murray County, Georgia, is a beautiful and tranquil space located in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It is a bustling county known for its natural beauty, friendly people, and rich history. But beneath the surface of this idyllic county lay a dark secret, one that remained unsolved for more than 15 years. In March 2008, 20-year-old Lance Jay Banister disappeared without a trace, leaving his family and friends baffled and worried. His disappearance would become one of the most notorious cold cases in the area's history, until a stunning breakthrough in 2021 finally shed light on what happened to him. Lance Jay Banister, born in 1988, was the son of Beverly and Alan Banister. He had a typical childhood growing up in Ackworth, Georgia. He attended Woodland High School and was a regular at the Faith Baptist Church. Lance had a close-knit group of friends and enjoyed spending time with his siblings, Philip and Tammy. However, this idyllic family life was soon shattered by tragedy. In early March 2008, Lance disappeared without any word to his family. They were extremely distressed, knowing he would never leave without informing them. So assuming something went wrong, they reported him missing on March 15, 2008. March 28, 2008 began like any other day, but at about 10:30 a.m., a fisherman close to the Talking Rock Bridge, near State Highway 136 and the Gordon County line, found a body in Carter's Lake and immediately contacted the authorities. Murray County officials scoured missing persons report across Tennessee and Georgia, from Cleveland to Atlanta, until they finally stumbled upon the missing report filed by Beverly Banister for her son, Lance Jay Banister, just a few weeks prior. With heavy hearts, officials contacted the Banister family to deliver the heartbreaking news of Lance's tragic demise. The news of Lance's untimely death left his family and friends devastated, and the community was left reeling in shock and grief. A graveside service was held on Thursday, April 10, 2008 at 2 p.m. at the Cheatham Hills Memorial Park in Marietta, with Reverend James Kitchens officiating in the loving memory of Lance. For the Banister family and the rest of the community, the discovery of Lance's body marked the beginning of a painful journey towards closure. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of life. Lance's disappearance and subsequent murder came as a shock to his loved ones and the community. It was a devastating blow to his family, who had hoped for a safe return. After being officially classified as a homicide case, the Murray County Sheriff's Department detectives began their investigation of the murder of Lance J. Banister. The foremost question that the investigators wanted the answer for was, who was Lance waiting for the last time he was seen alive? Upon reviewing the police report filed at the time of Lance's disappearance, the detectives learned that he was waiting for someone named Daniel to take him to Cartersville. This was a vital piece of information, and it made Daniel the prime suspect in the investigation, and the investigators wanted answers from him about Lance's death. Despite their best efforts, the detectives of the Murray County Sheriff's Office could not locate their prime suspect, Daniel. The trail had gone cold, and they were running out of options. That's when the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was brought on board to assist with the case. With their added resources and expertise, the detectives hoped to crack the case wide open and finally get the answers they were looking for. But sadly, without any real leads to follow, the case went cold. It sat on the unsolved homicide list for 15 years, until the investigation was finally reopened in 2023. With renewed enthusiasm, detectives dug deeper into the investigation, and a new suspect emerged. Shannon Tapley. Detectives learned that the victim and Shannon Tapley had a connection. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation discovered that Lance and Shannon were friends at the time, which piqued the detectives' interest. They dug deeper and discovered something even more troubling. They found out that Shannon was with Lance on the day he disappeared in March 2008. The detectives began to suspect Shannon's involvement in the crime, and the investigation led them to gather evidence against him. This was a shocking revelation that threw the investigation into disarray. Was someone Lance trusted capable of such a crime? The joint investigation involved Murray County Sheriff's Office detectives, Federal Bureau of Investigation, special agents from the Dalton Safe Streets Task Force, Bartow County Sheriff's Office detectives, and Georgia Bureau of Investigation agents. During the investigation, the authorities found evidence that suggested Shannon Tapley was responsible for Lance's death. The detectives focused their attention on Shannon, determined to uncover any evidence that might link him to the murderer. The investigation was intense, with every piece of information carefully analyzed and every lead followed up on. Finally, after months of tireless work, the joint investigation involving the Murray County Sheriff's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, special agents from the Dalton Safe Streets Task Force, and the Bartow County Sheriff's Office detectives came to the conclusion that Shannon Tapley was responsible for the murder of Lance J. Banister. While the exact details and evidence found against him has not been released to the public at this time, on March 5, 2023, Shannon Tapley was finally arrested and charged with the murder of Lance J. Banister, 15 years after his tragic death. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation revealed that Shannon is currently being held in custody at the Bartow County Jail on suspicion of murder charges. The arrest came as a moment of closure for Lance's family and the community who waited for years for justice to be served. However, it was also a harsh reminder that danger can come from unexpected places, and those closest to us can turn out to be the ones who causes the most harm. Despite the difficult circumstances, Lance's family and loved ones can now find some solace in the fact that the legal system is working to bring justice for their beloved Lance. A city in California, Thousand Oaks is a small town with big surprises. It is a place where you cannot walk down the street without bumping into someone you know. On April 28, 1997, the city of Thousand Oaks was met with a shock. 39-year-old Monica Leech was dead in broad daylight. On September 15, 1957, Elaine and Al Cavaletto gave birth to Monica Lynn Cavaletto Leech in the tight-knit Somas community of Oxnard, Ventura County, California. She graduated from Rio Mesa High School in 1975 and chose a career in banking, just like her family. When not at work, Monica enjoyed indulging in needlepoint and taking leisurely morning walks. She married Jeff Mintz and had 2 children, Stephanie and Andrew. After her divorce from Jeff, Monica met Floyd Leech in a church. His first wife had died due to a medical condition 6 months ago, and he was left with the responsibility to raise his 2 kids. Floyd started dating Monica, and he was finally happy after months. They both got married after 7 months of courtship and lived as a happy family with their 4 children. She was as kind and loving as one could be. Above all, Monica was known and cherished for her role as a devoted wife, daughter, and mother. Monica continued her career in the banking industry, which had been marked by a series of mergers and divestments, leading her to work at a variety of institutions throughout Port Hueneme and Oxnard over the course of 15 years. From the Bank of A. Levy to First Interstate to Home Savings of America, she had seen it all. She initially worked in the Oxnard area before transferring to Western Financial Bank just 2 short months before her untimely death. It was a decision she had made on the advice of her friends and family, who urged her to seek the safety and tranquility of Conejo Valley, a move that tragically proved futile. Everything was normal on April 28, 1997, when Monica gave a kiss to her husband Floyd and both of them left the house. Their morning routines were carried out as usual until the clock struck 10:15 a.m. 3 managers and a teller were going about their day at Western Financial Bank, 2920 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard, when 2 armed intruders came in. They wore strange yet professional disguises and posed as construction workers. The men were dressed in thigh-length jackets, had nylon stockings as masks, and yellow hard hats. Hurling obscenities at the 4 employees in the bank, the intruders demanded that they get on the floor, and they complied. Out of fear, Dee Dee Smith, the bank manager, hid under the desk and the robbers did not see her. She managed to push a button that triggered the bank's camera to take some photographs. However, according to bank safety measures, she could not have set off the alarms in the bank until the gunmen left. In the meantime, the men handcuffed the other employees and took them into the back room. Monica was asked to empty the vault, and she did. The 3 handcuffed employees, including Monica, were kneeling down, facing the other side, when suddenly the trigger went off. In the raw terror of that moment, for a second, no one understood if they had been hit by the bullet or someone else. That was when Monica slumped on the floor, dead. Monica's colleague could not hold back her shock. Even when she was still in danger, she freaked out and exclaimed, "Oh my God, oh my God." Despite Monica's cooperation, the men had shot her in the back of the head. With about $9,000, the gunmen ran out of the bank within 5 minutes of entering. They escaped in a 1994 Ford Explorer, but crashed it and then fled the scene. The employees who were still in the back ran out for help. The nearby chiropractor, Dr. Rich Schwartzberg, one of Monica's many clients, heard the commotion and came out. Everyone asked if he could do something to help, and all he could do was try. When he attempted to give her CPR, he knew nothing could save her. The bullet had hit her head. When the police were called, they were met with a grisly sight. The police knew that the tragedy was unavoidable that day. The bank had no security guard or locks on the front door. The community was so safe and secure that it was pretty normal not to have locks. Thousand Oaks, once deemed one of the safest cities in the country by the FBI, was now a place where the unthinkable could happen. This senseless murder left the entire community in shock. People were now looking over their shoulders, wondering if they could be the next victim. The police found all the evidence that was left inside the bank, including the handcuffs. They even found the vehicle that the robbers had used to escape, and found that it had been repainted since it was last seen. In order to find the culprits, witnesses were asked to give the description of the suspects. But due to the mask and hats, it had been difficult for them to notice any features. Therefore, the descriptions turned out to be different from each other. Still, composite sketches were produced. Police had the entire story with them. The only thing that was missing was the names of the perpetrators, but everything about this case was proving to be difficult. John Riley was the first deputy who responded to the call at the bank. When Monica's family showed up asking about her, it was the first time that the young officer, who had been on patrol for just 18 months, cried at work. Monica's children from her previous marriage, 10-year-old Stephanie Mintz and 13-year-old Andrew Andy Mintz, were in the middle of their school day when they got the news. Hearing about her mother's sudden and violent death left Stephanie in disbelief. She struggled to make sense of the cruel and unfair world that had robbed her of a loving parent. Captain Eric Bushchow, with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, believed the robbers knew what they were doing. He explained that they weren't stupid and entered the bank after taking measures that would stop them from being recognized. Putting on the disguise and going in was simply adding a reflective vest and a hard hat that draws your attention away from the face, he said when talking about the robbers. Bank robbers are usually solely focused on getting money. All the arms and ammunitions are mostly to cause terror. However, the cases of dedicated killings are different, where the robbers entered the bank with a target to kill. The motto was to get the money and do it with violence, irrespective of how cooperative the staff might be. The motive seemed pretty clear. In fact, the case seemed half solved because the detectives knew where to look for the answers. The case matched the MO of Crips gang members, who had terrorized South Los Angeles with back-to-back bank robberies at the time. Dr. Georgia Leech, a professor at the UCLA Luskin School, who had been studying gangs for over 4 decades, said that the Crips were one of the oldest gangs in the southwest Los Angeles area and had spread all over the world. The gang is not only known for criminal activity, but also for social services like community activities focused on hosting charity events and providing assistance to those in need. As the investigators pored over the case files, frustration mounted with every passing hour. The notorious Crips had committed yet another heinous crime, and despite their best efforts, the detectives were no closer to identifying the culprit. With the clock ticking and the pressure mounting, they knew they needed a breakthrough. But where would it come from? Months had passed since Monica's tragic death, but the wounds were still raw for those closest to her. Her husband, Floyd Leech, struggled to keep his composure as he worked at the auto repair shop, often retreating to a back room to weep. Not only had he lost his beloved wife, but he was also separated from his stepchildren, who now lived with their father and stepmother in Upper Ojai. For Al and Elaine Cavaletto, Monica's parents, memories of their daughter crept up at the most unexpected times, triggered by songs about angels or the sight of someone wearing a peach or flowered dress. Despite the passage of time, the pain and grief were ever present, a constant reminder of the irreplaceable loss they had suffered. Monica's mother, Elaine, a 62-year-old assistant vice president at the Citizens State Bank in Santa Paula, spoke of the cruel irony of it all. That her daughter had finally found some peace in banking, only to be taken from them so suddenly and brutally. She had been in one of the safest cities in the country, and to add an extra layer of security during her daily commute to work, her husband had purchased a cell phone and a Ford Contour for her. For a brief moment, it seemed like Monica had finally found the peace and contentment she had been searching for in her career. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. Elaine expressed her grief and anger over the situation. Jail time, she felt, was not enough. It wouldn't truly make them pay for the heinous act that they had committed. Instead, she envisioned something far more brutal. The culprits should be given tools and forced to plow the road, a grueling and backbreaking task that would leave them exhausted and humbled. The once safe neighborhood was forever changed after Monica Leech's tragic death. The bank where she worked now had to have an armed security guard, and the board of directors voted to create a memorial fund of $100,000 for her family. The employees were deeply affected by the incident, and after a few weeks off to help them recover, they returned to work. However, within a year, none of them were working in banking anymore. The bank manager, Dee Dee Smith, left her decades-long banking career to become a tour manager. Another female teller couldn't even bring herself to go to work and stayed home with her children, while the financial services officer of the bank, who knew and worked with Monica, returned to school to pursue a career as a special education teacher. Months and years were passing by as the detectives sat in their cramped office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and empty coffee cups. One thing became painfully clear: they needed inside information. The Crips gang was a formidable foe, with countless members and a tight-knit code of silence. The detectives knew that without a snitch, they could be investigating this case indefinitely. In 2001, police were confident that the new technology would be able to extract DNA from the evidence. Touch DNA used to be rather difficult to retrieve and identify, as it didn't rely on bodily fluids but on cells, which contained fairly less DNA. However, the growth in science and technology eliminated the restrictions, yet the case did not actually progress. 3 decades had come and gone, but the wound was as fresh as ever, and the passage of time had done nothing to dull the pain. In 2012, Floyd opposed the new Cheetos ad that featured 2 robbers entering a bank. The advertisement, was supposed to be humorous and entertaining according to the company, but Floyd knew it was no laughing matter. After all, he lost his wife to a similar incident. The calendar pages flipped by, and the investigators found themselves stuck in a frustrating and seemingly endless loop. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't seem to get any closer to catching the culprit. With each passing year, the case grew colder, and their hopes grew dimmer. In 2021, Pari Dedo, a member of Crips' gang, met with the media outlet and described his life since he joined the Crips as a 10-year-old child as a means of survival. He stole food so his friends could eat. He found people to trust and depend on amid so much uncertainty. With his understanding of the gang, Pari believed that this particular incident had happened because the robbers had been desperate. Floyd's unrelenting pursuit of justice served as a driving force that rekindled the investigation into Monica's murder. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office and the Cold Case Unit, moved by his persistence, reopened the case in March of 2021. Although years had passed since the crime was committed, detectives believed that Monica's killers were still out there, and the FBI and Ventura County Crime Stoppers offered a substantial reward of $30,000 for any information that could lead to their capture. After years of searching, authorities made a breakthrough in the Monica Leech murder case by amplifying and isolating the DNA from the evidence left at the scene. Investigators linked the crime to a 55-year-old man named Kevin Ray James, who was arrested on March 9, 2023 in San Bernardino. James was charged with first-degree murder, commission of a robbery, and using a firearm in the commission of the offense. Ventura County District Attorney Eric Nasarenko praised the tireless work of the investigators and revealed that James would be held without bail at the Ventura County Jail. According to reports, Kevin Ray James, the suspect charged in Monica Leech's murder case, was a gang member living in the Los Angeles area at the time of the crime. However, investigators were not able to identify the second suspect involved in the robbery. Therefore, a $30,000 reward from the FBI and a $100,000 reward from Crime Stoppers is still available for any information leading to the identification of the second suspect. While the pain of losing Monica will never completely go away, her loved ones could finally find a measure of closure, knowing that one of the individuals responsible for her death had been brought to justice. Nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, East Greenbush is a town in Rensselaer County, a picturesque region of small towns and bustling cities. But this peaceful setting was also the place where 81-year-old Wilomeana Filkins was found bludgeoned to death in her Coventry Lane East Greenbush apartment on August 19, 1994. The story of Wilomeana Violet Filkins takes us back to June 9, 1913, when she was born in New York. Wilomeana's parents were Myron Filkins, who was 41 at the time of her birth, and Georgiana Wright, who was 39. In 1930, Wilomeana lived in Rensselaer, New York, and by 1950, she had moved to Greenbush, New York. Growing up in Rensselaer with 7 sisters and 1 brother, she had learned the value of hard work and perseverance early on. It was a lesson she carried with her throughout her 60 years in the cozy town of East Greenbush, where she had put down roots and flourished. Though she never sought the spotlight, she was loved and respected by all who knew her. A retiree from the Department of Education, Wilomeana had a passion for gardening that was the envy of her neighbors. Her backyard was a riot of color, with vibrant flowers and lush greenery spilling over every inch of available space. And she didn't keep her talents to herself. She was also an avid volunteer, lending her green thumb to various community projects over the years. While she never married or had children of her own, Wilomeana had a way of nurturing those around her. With her gentle smile and kind heart, she lived her dreariest of days alone. Even at 81 years old, and standing at a petite 5'2" with sparkling blue eyes, Wilomeana had a vitality that connected her to all who knew her. August 19, 1994, was a day that would forever be etched in the memories of those who knew and loved Wilomeana Filkins. After several failed attempts to reach her, Wilomeana's brother, Sterling, and her niece, Carol Filkins, came to her ground floor apartment at 2202 Coventry Apartments to check on her. Carol became suspicious when she noticed that the drapes were caught in the door. Something just didn't feel right, so she pushed the door open and was met with a sight that would haunt her forever. Her beloved aunt, lifeless and cold, lay motionless on the floor. The police were immediately called, but even with their thorough search of the apartment, they were unable to locate a murder weapon. An autopsy revealed that she had been dead for 2 days, and the cause of her death was several vicious blows to the back of her head. But what could have led to such a brutal attack on this quiet and unassuming woman? It was suspected that Wilomeana was the victim of a daytime robbery 2 days earlier. The police noticed that her car, a 1989 Plymouth Reliant, was unusually parked. Her family told them it was not parked how she normally parked it. That was when they realized that the killer had used her car to dispose of her belongings. During the investigation of her death, a thumbprint was discovered on a coffee table in her apartment. Police took the thumbprint as evidence in the hope that it could provide a clue to the identity of the killer. This discovery could be a potential breakthrough in the case. The police worked diligently to compare the thumbprint to prints in their database, hoping to find a match and bring closure to the case. However, it did not yield any results, and the days kept passing by. 3 years after her death, in 1997, some of her items were found by a cemetery caretaker on a remote road bordering the cemetery, which is on Route 203 in the village of Nassau. The discovery led the detectives behind the Nassau Skodek Cemetery, where the items were found. It confirmed their story that the suspect had used Wilomeana's car. While the police never revealed exactly what was found, they believed that the killer was a local resident, as the area was only known to those in the community. Troop G Major Crimes Unit members, the Bureau of Criminal Investigations Unit at the State Police Shattuck Barracks, and the East Greenbush Police Department worked tirelessly to gather all the information they could about the case. They conducted extensive interviews with potential witnesses and suspects in the hopes of shedding light on what happened to Filkins and who was responsible for her death. For decades, the tragic murder of Wilomeana had been at the forefront of the town's police department's investigations. With the case file handed to a new investigator every time a predecessor retired, each detective took on the case file and vowed to find the heinous perpetrator responsible for the crime. Despite the many years that had passed, the department's unwavering commitment to justice did not falter. Through the revolving doors of detectives, there had always been a promise made to continue the search for answers and to bring closure to Wilomeana's family. In 2019, a long-awaited breakthrough in the Wilomeana Filkins murder case occurred while the New York State Police and East Greenbush Police received a tip from a close acquaintance of a potential suspect. Jeremiah J. Gaetti's ex-girlfriend had recently watched a true crime show about cold cases on Netflix, which triggered her memory of strange comments Gaetti had made about an elderly woman. She quickly reported her suspicions to the authorities. According to East Greenbush Police, Detective Sergeant Michael Guadagnino, with the new information, investigators were able to unravel the web of Gaetti's life, tracking his movements and places of residence to build a case against him. What's more, after discovering Wilomeana's body in 1977, The police had launched an intense investigation, canvassing the entire apartment complex and questioning hundreds of witnesses, including Jeremiah Gaetti, who lived in apartment 10, just around the corner from the victim's home. Despite being in such close proximity to the crime scene and having been interviewed shortly after the murder, Gaetti was not initially considered a person of interest. Jeremiah James Gaetti, the prime suspect in the murder of Wilomeana Filkins, had a rather tumultuous life. He was born on March 21, 1976, and later moved to the same East Greenbush apartment complex where Filkins lived to stay with his father. He graduated from Columbia High School in 1994 and left East Greenbush for Red Hook the same year. After joining the Air Force, he was stationed in Florida before being discharged and returned to Red Hook before eventually moving to Rosendale. Gaetti's career as a bus driver involved transporting school children and the elderly. The ex-girlfriend's recollection of Gaetti's comments was chilling. She remembered him telling her that he had robbed a woman and hit her. In August 2009, he expressed his disbelief after learning that the woman had died. "This can't be true. I'm sure she is fine." But she was not fine, and he had most definitely killed her. After learning this, the New York State Police and the East Greenbush Police sprang into action and headed to Rosendale in Ulster County, New York. There, they conducted extensive interviews with Gaetti's family members, co-workers, and friends in an effort to gather evidence against him. However, on October 1, 2019, when the police attempted to question Gaetti himself, he immediately demanded a lawyer. The very next day, on October 2, 2019, nearly 70 miles south of East Greenbush, authorities made a chilling discovery in the garage of Jeremiah Gaetti's home in Rosendale: his lifeless body with a gunshot wound to the head. The autopsy revealed the shocking news that Gaetti had taken his own life, leaving behind a slew of unanswered questions about his involvement in the decades-old murder case. Gaetti's death did not put an end to the investigation. An autopsy was performed and his fingerprints and DNA were collected for further comparison with the evidence from the original case. All physical evidence was resubmitted, including the wooden coffee table with the unknown fingerprint. The investigators hoped to find a match. While the testing was being carried out, a family member came forward in 2021 and confirmed Gaetti's involvement in the murder. On October 1, 2019, after he had a conversation with the detectives, he panicked and called his family member, revealing that he did not want to go to prison. The family member also disclosed that Gaetti had also once planned to rob a bank and steal a car for money to pay for his college education. Despite making arrangements to meet with a lawyer, Gaetti could not hold off his guilt and ended up taking his own life. It took 3 years for forensic experts to finally determine the identity of the unknown fingerprint. The delay was due to the strain on the state crime lab caused by the COVID pandemic. However, when the results finally came in, investigators received confirmation that the fingerprint belonged to none other than Jeremiah James Gaetti, the prime suspect in the decades-old murder of Wilomeana Filkins. The fingerprint was a match to Gaetti's left thumb, providing the conclusive evidence needed to close the case once and for all. All the information about the case was disclosed to the public by authorities on January 19, 2023. Wilomeana was 81 years old at the time of her death, and Gaetti would have been just 18 years old. Despite his involvement in the 1998 murder of Wilomeana Filkins, he managed to avoid suspicion for decades. The district attorney, Mary Pat Donnelly, emphasized that every single detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant, had contributed to this breakthrough in the investigation. While Gaetti ultimately took his own life before he could be brought to justice, The resolution of this case brought some closure to the community, especially to Wilomeana's family. Sabine Parish, Louisiana, is a picturesque region filled with lush forests, serene lakes, and sprawling hills. Nestled between the bustling cities of Lafayette and Shreveport, it is a place where nature and modern life intersect in an idyllic blend. But behind this peaceful facade lies a dark secret. The remains of Lester Rome were found here, hidden away in a well in 1986, in what is perhaps the most chilling crime scene the area has ever witnessed. The well, where Rome's remains were discovered, was located in Many, Louisiana, a quaint town in the heart of Sabine Parish. The well, once used for irrigation, is now a haunting reminder of the murder that occurred nearly 4 decades ago. The crime has left an indelible mark on the community, forever changing the way residents view their town. It's a sobering reminder that evil can lurk even in the most seemingly peaceful places. It all began in early 1984, when a 57-year-old man named Lester Rome vanished without a trace, leaving his family with more questions than answers. On January 9, 1984, 57-year-old Lester J. Rome went missing from Grand Isle, Louisiana. According to the police report filed by Lester's family, after waiting several days for Lester to return, his family finally filed the report with the Grand Isle Police Department, Louisiana. Following the filing of the complaint, the police department, located on a narrow barrier islands along the Louisiana coastline, initiated an investigation into Lester Rome's disappearance. After a month of investigating Lester Rome's disappearance, with no significant progress, the case was transferred to the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, which is located 2 hours north of New Orleans. The investigation soon became a collaborative effort among multiple law enforcement agencies, as they followed various leads and tips in hopes of finding clues to solve the case. Upon initiating the investigation into Lester's disappearance, the detectives spoke with Patricia Tito, who lived in Lester's home. According to the deputies, Tito claimed to be running Lester's business in his absence and stated that he had gone on a trip before disappearing. She denied having any information regarding any wrongdoing in the matter. Despite the tireless efforts of the investigators, the search for Lester continued for years, with no solid leads. However, in a surprising turn of events, a shocking discovery was eventually made in the heart of Louisiana, in the central region of the state. On April 18, 1986, human remains were found in a water well located in Many, Sabine Parish, Louisiana. The Sabine Parish Sheriff's Office, which is situated 4 hours away between Lafayette and Shreveport, initiated a homicide investigation upon discovering the remains. No one at the time knew the discovery of his body would be a mystery for nearly 40 years, as the remains were unidentified and the case was referred to as the man in the well. It was October 2013 when the Faces Laboratory made a possible connection between the remains from the well and Rome. Using advanced technology and forensic techniques, the remains found in the well were eventually confirmed to be those of Lester Rome, ending the decades-long mystery. In the search for answers, the LSU Forensic Anthropology and Computer Enhancement Services, FACES, laboratory played a crucial role in connecting the remains found in the well to Lester Rome. One significant discovery was that the skeletal remains had shotgun pellets embedded in the pelvic area. It was then revealed that Lester had been shot in the abdomen area with a shotgun some years before he went missing. This crucial piece of evidence helped in identifying Rome's remains and linking them to the mysterious case of the man in the well. With this revelation, the investigation took a new turn, and law enforcement agencies intensified their efforts to identify the perpetrator responsible for Lester Rome's death. The cause of Lester Rome's death was determined to be stabbing, and his body was found with several personal items, including a blue shirt, blue knit pants, brown belt, light blazer jacket, sneaker-type shoes, a key ring with 5 small keys on it, a folding brush comb combination, a urine cup, a small pocket knife, and a Snoopy nightlight. Further investigation into Lester Rome's disappearance revealed that he had suffered an old injury to his left hip from a gunshot wound, which had likely caused him to walk with a limp and experience chronic pain despite the wound having healed. The autopsy report also revealed that he had a bridge on the upper right side of his mouth and multiple fillings. These findings provided additional clues to the investigators, helping them to build a clearer picture of Rome's life and what may have happened to him. It wasn't until 2021 that the mystery was finally solved. Central Sabine Fire Department provided assistance to the sheriff's office in recovering evidence from the well located off Reckner Road. The operation involved a team of 9 firefighters, the sheriff, 2 detectives, and 3 support members. The well was approximately 27 feet deep, and the oxygen level was closely monitored throughout the operation to ensure the safety of everyone involved. A fan was used to push fresh air into the well. The team successfully recovered evidence from the well, which was then handed over to the detectives for further investigation. The cooperation and expertise of the Central Sabine Fire Department was instrumental in ensuring the success of the operation. The Sabine Parish Sheriff's Office reviewed Lester's missing person case and decided to speak with Tito. According to sources, during an interview with the investigators, Patricia Tito made a stunning admission. She confessed that Lester Rome was actually murdered in Grand Isle and that his remains had been disposed of in Sabine Parish. This revelation was a crucial breakthrough in the case and provided investigators with the vital information to continue their investigation. With this new information, the focus of the investigation shifted to uncovering the identity of the perpetrators responsible for Lester Rome's murder. In a surprising turn of events, in the spring of 2022, Patricia Tito led investigators to the exact location where Lester Rome was murdered. This was a significant development in the case, as it provided crucial evidence and allowed investigators to gather new information that would help bring the perpetrators to justice. The investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the events that had taken place, building a timeline of events and collecting evidence to support their case. Tito's cooperation in the investigation was instrumental in helping to bring closure to the case of Lester Rome's disappearance and murder. During her cooperation with the investigation, Tito made additional claims, alleging that she was present during the murder of Lester Rome, but placed the blame solely on a man named Delvin Avard Sibley, now 76 years old. Tito further claimed that Sibley took Rome's remains with him when he left Grand Isle. In a statement posted on Facebook, the sheriff's office highlighted that while the level of Patricia Tito's involvement in the murder of Lester Rome was not entirely clear, she was aware of the crime and failed to notify law enforcement or any of Rome's family members between 1984 and 2021. Despite her protestations of innocence, Tito's knowledge of Rome's death and her failure to report it to authorities were seen as significant violations of the law. Her actions allowed the perpetrators of the crime to evade justice for nearly 4 decades and caused untold suffering to the family and loved ones of Lester Rome. The authorities made it clear that Tito would be held accountable for her role in the crime, and the investigation would continue to bring all those responsible for the heinous act to justice. Following Patricia Tito's confession and the information she provided during her interview, the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office confirmed Delvin Avard Sibley as a person of interest in the murder of Lester Rome. Subsequent investigations conducted by law enforcement revealed that the remains of Lester were found in a well on the property that was previously owned by Sibley's family. This discovery further deepened the suspicion and strengthened the case against Sibley in the Rome murder. The authorities continued to investigate and gather evidence against Sibley, who was now a prime suspect in multiple homicide cases. Upon further investigation, and with the evidence pointing towards Sibley, law enforcement issued arrest warrants in 2023 for Sibley on charges of second-degree murder in the death of Lester Rome and Tito as well for her involvement in the crime. It is certainly concerning that Patricia Tito did not come forward with the information about Lester Rome's murder earlier, despite serving a sentence for an unrelated crime she committed in 2003. Her failure to notify law enforcement or Rome's family about his death for almost 4 decades is a serious matter, and it raises questions about her level of involvement in the crime. While it is not clear what motivated Tito's actions, it is important that all individuals who have knowledge of a crime come forward to help bring justice to the victim and their family. Sibley was arrested at his home in Biloxi when Sabine Sheriff's Detective Chris Abrams got an arrest warrant for him after working on the cold case for the past 10 months. Sibley was extradited from Biloxi and booked into the Sabine Parish Detention Center on a charge of second-degree murder. Sibley is accused in the death of Lester Rome and will soon stand trial. This next case takes us to a dynamic city with a number of soaring skyscrapers, Toronto, the capital of Ontario Province in Canada. It was here, in this bustling metropolitan, that a heinous crime took place in 1993. In the city of Toronto, on April 24, 1950, Barbara Brodkin was born. Although little is known about her early years, such as her parents' names or where she received her education, it is known that she spent her formative years in Toronto. In the 1980s, she met a man named Christopher Barry. When she first met Christopher, there was an immediate chemistry between them. After a brief courtship, the couple got married in a beautiful ceremony. They were ecstatic when they had their first child in 1987, a handsome baby boy they named Zachary. Barbara, however, observed a shift in Christopher not long after he was born. He started to spend less time at home and showed signs of irritability and a short temper whenever he was around. Barbara made the decision that enough was enough when he started becoming violent and aggressive towards her. She decided to leave him and took Zachary with her and moved into a flat on Balliol Street. Here she started a new life as a single parent while working multiple jobs as a secretary and typist. It was difficult being a single mother, and she frequently had financial difficulties. She started selling marijuana out of her flat to people she knew in an effort to supplement her income. Barbara believed that this was her only choice, despite the fact that it may not have been the best one. She was engaged in a bitter custody dispute with Christopher and had a young child to support. She was willing to do whatever was necessary to provide her son with the best life possible. In 1993, Barbara was 42 and Zachary was 6, and they were living in their little apartment on Balliol Street. Sadly, they were unaware that tragedy was waiting for them just out of sight. On March 19, 1993, Toronto awoke from its slumber and people went about their regular routines. But there was complete silence in Barbara's flat. Her son Zachary slept in. He was never woken by his mother to get ready for school. When he eventually opened his eyes on his own, the home was strangely silent. He got out of bed, wondering why his mother hadn't woken him up for school, and went exploring in search of her. He searched the entire home, but couldn't locate her anywhere, so he headed to her bedroom. What he was about to find would stay with him for the rest of his life. He discovered his mother's bloodied body next to the wardrobe in her bedroom. The closet door lay open as he tried to get her to move. Barbara, sadly, was dead. Zachary proceeded to do as she had instructed him to do in an emergency and called 911. When the boy told the operator that his mother was covered in blood and not moving, they realized something was terribly wrong. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air as squad cars rolled up to the crime scene. Rob Thomas, a young constable, was the first to arrive on the scene. In the flat, he discovered Zachary alone and a lifeless Barbara stretched out in the bedroom. He removed the little child from the residence before cordoning off the crime scene. The investigation began soon after, as several detectives and forensic experts arrived at the flat. They noticed Barbara had a solitary stab wound to the chest when they examined her body. She had scratches on her wrist and arms that showed she had fought back against her attacker, and she had marks around her neck that suggested she may have been strangled. The medical examiner then submitted the body for an autopsy. A few days later, the findings of the autopsy were released. The single knife wound to her heart was determined to be the cause of death. Foreign DNA was discovered under her fingernails during the autopsy. These nail clippings were stored away in case they could prove useful later in the investigation. Police then interviewed her friends, relatives, colleagues, and neighbors to see if anyone had any information that could help with the investigation. Over 295 witnesses were interrogated in the hopes of obtaining relevant information, and detectives discovered a number of leads to pursue. The main lead they were interested in was Barbara's side business of selling marijuana. They learned that she stored her product and the cash she earned from selling it in a cosmetics case in her cupboard. But when they searched the cupboard, this case was nowhere to be found. This made them sure that the robbery was likely the motive behind the murder. However, when they could find no suspects within her known customers, they shifted their attention to someone else who had begun to stand out during their investigation. This person was Christopher Berry, Barbara's ex-husband, who had a history of displaying violence towards her, as well as an assault charge from a separate incident. He also lived nearby and was well aware of Barbara's routines, which police saw as means and opportunity. They aggressively interviewed Christopher 4 times during the investigation, but could never find any evidence against him. His girlfriend provided an alibi for him, confirming that he was with her at the time of the murder. And when they tested his hair and saliva samples against the DNA found at the scene, they were not a match. With no evidence against him and no further reason to hold him, police were forced to let Christopher go, but he remained the primary suspect in their minds. After this, they had very few leads to follow up on and no other major suspects to pursue, and eventually, as time progressed, the case turned cold. For 24 years, the case stayed cold until it was finally reopened in 2017. In a twist of fate, the lead detective on the new investigation was Rob Thomas, the same young constable who had been first on the scene all those years ago. He still remembered finding young Zachary at the scene of the crime. And now, a senior detective in the Toronto PD, he was determined to help provide closure and solve the case once and for all. After going through all the cold case files and evidence from the original investigation, they decided to run the DNA from underneath Barbara's fingernails through the system again to see if there were any new matches that would turn up. Detectives were overjoyed when the system gave them a match, someone who had not been a part of the original investigation at all, a man named Charles Mustard. Born in 1954, Charles William Mustard was the 7th and youngest child of the world-renowned Toronto surgeon, Dr. William Mustard. When detectives looked into his past, they found a disturbing trail of crimes. In the early 90s, Mustard was arrested for 8 counts of sexual assault against a number of females at a local shopping mall in southern Ontario. Shortly after this, he lost his job as a teacher. It was while awaiting trial in 1993 for these crimes that he had made the acquaintance of Barbara, who used to sell him marijuana. Mustard was 39 at the time. When detectives learned this, they theorized that Mustard had likely killed Barbara due to being low on cash after losing his job and had stolen her case of marijuana along with her money. After Barbara's death, in 1993, Mustard was convicted of the sexual assault case that he had been involved in and was sent to jail. In the years that followed, Mustard was always in and out of prison, accused and convicted of a variety of crimes. Between 1993 and 2007, he had a total of 12 different convictions for sexual assault and interference, all against females. The last offense on his record was for the theft of $5,000 in 2011. After the DNA match and learning of Mustard's troubling history, police now had enough evidence to charge him. On October 19, 2018, Charles Mustard was arrested and charged with the murder of Barbara Brodkin. Soon after, the case went to trial, and it was a judge-alone trial that would drag on for 5 long years. Mustard denied any involvement in Barbara's death and tried to convince the judge that his DNA was found under Barbara's nails because the two had shared a marijuana joint on the day she died, which Mustard had licked when rolling it. But the judge ruled this to be false, as this would not be enough to deposit his DNA underneath the fingernails of both her hands. On February 23, 2023, Ontario Superior Court Justice Brian O'Mara found 69-year-old Charles Mustard to be guilty of the murder of Barbara Brodkin and convicted him on a second-degree murder charge. His bail was revoked, and he was taken into custody by Toronto police. His sentencing hearing was scheduled for early April.